Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now the MSI AMD Radeon RX 5500 XT might be one of the best looking graphics cards around. I really like the black and silver theme. I've never tested one of these before either, so I'm quite excited about doing so. The 4GB version, yes, but the superior 8GB model, this is new territory to me. There are no other differences between the 4 and 8GB card aside from just that, but the 8GB model will make more sense in 2022 given the extra GDDR6. I paid about the same as you can find a 6500 XT for here in the UK, which of course ships with 4 gigs only and is more limited in terms of PCIe bandwidth, especially with older systems. The 5500 XT here also has hardware encoding, so you can record gameplay using AMD Relive for example, plus it has triple monitor support. This isn't a comparison though, not today anyway. I just wanted to see how the 5500 XT here holds up because it seems to be somewhat of an overlooked used market option. I can tell by the lack of modern 5500 XT videos on YouTube. That might be because its price seems to vary quite a bit from country to country, and there may be some better performing options at whatever price point this fits into where you live. Jumping into the first game, Warzone, and the benefit of hardware encoding has already become useful. It's what I'm using to record the footage with minimal performance loss. The 8 gigs of memory is also very handy, though Warzone soon chews through that. The 5500 XT was a mid-range graphics card back in 2019, but it's one that is still capable of achieving at least 60 FPS in modern games, providing you don't expect too much from the visual settings. Here, I started by setting everything to high before enabling 1x SMAA and then reducing the shadow map resolution setting to low. I also disabled ambient occlusion and screen space reflections. These changes were probably unnecessary, but doing so helped keep those percentile figures up, and overall Call of Duty Warzone performed very well with this card. Cyberpunk 2077 ran well in both busier areas and empty city zones, exceeding 60 FPS on average. I opted for the low preset but changed the textures to medium to crisp things up a bit, and then switched the crowd density to medium as well just to breathe more life into Night City. Enabling a slightly higher texture quality setting was possible of course thanks to the additional VRAM, though you might find that keeping everything at low gives you a bit more breathing room and may improve the percentile figures. That said, I am using an i3-12300, and as good as it is, you might find that using a faster processor with additional cores will also help out with this. The i3 can handle a lot more, but it's also a sensible pairing for a card like this one. It's not too overboard, but it'll allow the 5500 to reach its maximum potential, especially considering it supports PCI Express 4.0. Elden Ring with the high preset will exhibit a few dips below 60, but I found that reducing the shadows, volumetric and grass quality, three of the more impactful settings, seems to help reduce the performance loss during action intensive scenes. As you can see by the on-screen figures, the game average was the same as the FPS cap, and the 1% low wasn't far behind. The 0.1% low wasn't too bad either, and so far the 5500 XT seems like a capable 1080p gaming choice these days. I also reduced a couple of demanding settings to medium in Far Cry 6 after starting with the high preset. These were the geometry and environment settings. I think the additional VRAM really came in handy here as well. Sorry for the nighttime scene by the way. I'll stand around for a while and save the game during the day before my next benchmark video I think, just to make it easier to see what's actually going on. Still, it makes the fire and gunshot effects more immersive, so there's that. There are no problems in Fortnite apart from the odd stutter. Playing at 1440p resolves this though. The average performance will of course decrease. Not that it matters because it will sit at above 100 regardless. So far the 8GB 5500 XT has shown to be a solid 1080p gaming card even 2.5 years after its release. It sits between an RX 590 and 1660 Super performance wise, and I found this one for less money than both of those, but that will vary from place to place as I mentioned. While no one's really talking about this card anymore, that may be because prices are still too high as of April 2022. Forza Horizon 5 needed no adjustments to the preset in order to run well. High with MSAA left at the default X2 seemed to suffice, and the game ran just fine with these settings with over 60 FPS. Even both percentile figures stayed above this, which is always nice to see, and during my testing the 5500 stayed fairly quiet and cool, which goes for all of today's games. I mentioned it at the start, but I really like MSI's styling, plus the design keeps the card at a sensible temperature, so what more could you ask for? God of War was a little more demanding than I thought, but the original preset meant a 60 FPS plus average. The percentile lows were also pretty close, so there's no stutter or slowdown to mention. Trying to defeat this chunky boy seemed to put some strain on the system, so I always tend to use this as a benchmark test, but I'm sure there are other areas that can get a bit more intensive. In GTA 5 I set everything to high and maxed out the detail sliders, but I also chose 4x MSAA. This dropped the frame rate quite significantly, as you can imagine, but almost eliminated all of the jagged edges. Now normally I'd leave this setting off, but because we had extra performance to spare, in a way, I thought why not try and improve the image quality just a little bit. We're still getting 100 FPS with decent 1 and 0.1% low figures. With MSAA off, this was closer to 140, 150, but FXAA on its own doesn't do much for the jagged edges around vehicles and objects. In Red Dead Redemption 2 I went for Digital Foundry's Xbox One X equivalent settings as usual, except from the resolution, which for the card's benefit was at 1920 by 1080 instead of 4K. Here we saw at least 60 FPS with a little bit of a drop in performance around busier settlements, the usual. Still, if you're looking for a better than last gen console experience, then the 5500 XT will provide that with ease. The game still looks really good with these settings, which combine a little bit of everything and include medium TAA, so there's no nasty jagged edges anywhere. You could increase TAA sharpening for a slightly crispier image too, if you wanted. The RX 5500 XT is best experienced in its 8GB glory in 2022. It's still a decent mid-range 1080p performer, and while it seems to be somewhat forgotten about, that may be because at the moment its pricing is still hit and miss. If you can find one for less money than an RX 590 or 1660 Super, it's definitely worth considering, but if it's encroaching on RX 5600 XT or 6600 pricing where you live, then it's not going to be a very wise purchase, put it that way. If we look at it on its own, from a purely performance perspective, then it's still pretty decent, but cost is always important to consider as well. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this look back at the 5500 XT from AMD. If you enjoyed this one, leave a like, leave a dislike if you didn't. Let me know what you think of this card below in the comments, as well as if you've got one, of course. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and hopefully I'll see all of you in the next one.